And I think, this kind of higher political level was present in all of the movements that we've seen against oppression this year. I think it was very clear. So, for example, in Poland, and where Anja mentioned that before, and in the movement against, in the movement for abortion in Poland, we saw much wider slogans. Like there was a slogan that says, "I wish I could abort my government," which I think is a really high level of analysis. So I want to ask you, Anja, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of inspiring movements that we've seen, like against women's oppression throughout the year, and kind of like because I think the point that Algia made about how global the movements have been, and also how important it is for them to be international. Can you also tell us about the impact that they had on one another?
So if we're looking at the movements of this year, then really it has been a really strange year, in the sense that the divide between before the pandemic and after the arrival of the pandemic was visually clear. This year started with the continuation of mass mobilizations, with massive women's marches all over Iraq, and massive mobilizations against the anti-Muslim law in India, in which women played a massive role. And around the 8th of March, International Women's Day, there were impressive demonstrations in Chile with more than 1 million participants, or the massive national women's strike in Mexico as a response to the huge number of femicides, but also the biggest demonstration in the history of the country. And in Argentina as well, we saw this massive strike. And in many European countries, demonstrations were a lot bigger than they were in the years before. And we saw that the women's movement already on the 8th of March spread out further with actions in Kyrgyzstan, in Albania, where we saw big mobilizations against gender violence. 2020 was also the year in which the international women's movement adopted its own international anthem, with the Chilean Rapists on Your Path, which was first performed on the 25th of November 2019, showing the consciousness among women about the systemic nature of women's oppression, the criminal role of governments, of police, of justice departments, the links between the capitalist system and women's oppression. It shows that broader layers start to understand that there is simply no capitalism without sexism. They just belong together. They are intertwined. But then the pandemic hit, and images of protests started to look very differently, with actions that practice social distancing and the disappearance a bit during a while of mass demonstrations, with many organizations going over to virtual action on social media. In China, when more than 1 in 4 women are estimated to have suffered domestic violence, this virtual action is very widespread and ongoing. And in September in Iran, we saw the start of their Me Too movement also on social media. But also street action, notwithstanding the risk of the virus and the official restrictions, quickly came back to the agenda. Already in April in Bangladesh, textile workers hit the street to demand the payment of their wages, which was suspended because the orders of the Western companies had been cancelled. In June, a new women's strike took place in Switzerland. In July, women protested against the new cabinet that was installed in France and contained one new minister who was accused of rape and another minister who publicly spoke out against Me Too. But the movement that has given heart and courage to women worldwide was definitely the absolutely magnificent and massive response against the Polish government attempt to make the abortion completely illegal. For days on end, these images of these massive mobilizations were spread all over the world, and in many countries, solidarity action took place. And other recent images that show women's resistance and determination, and that gives us hope, was the role that women played in a massive protests in Belarus. I recently saw this quite widespread video of a protest of women attacked by thugs in alliance with the security forces, where the women on the protest did not allow for this intimidation. They just went to those thugs, took off their masks, and then they went running. And these are the kind of images that really warm my heart. This central and frontline role of women in more general mass protest movements was also clear in Thailand's pro-democracy movements. And it is a continuation of a feature that was already clear in all mass revolts we saw in 2019. Those who hope that women's resistance will stop or diminish should definitely think again.